I'll coach you there. Really want to thank you all for being here tonight for a fascinating conversation about what's happening in K-12 education with some very distinguished educators. I want to thank our staff for making this happen, putting it all together. Really appreciate it. Our Zoom guru, without whom no Zoom happens. Really appreciate that. I also want to thank the faculty that's here very much for being here tonight to be with your students and support them in their continuous learning. My name's David Cash, and I'm nothing but the facilitator for this event tonight. You're going to get to hear from some really stellar educators, and I'm going to introduce them. First, our dean, Pedro Noguera. Keep it short. These are the short bios for these three. He's one of the nation's leading scholars on issues related to race, inequality, and education. Prior to coming to USC to serve as the Emory Stoops and Joyce King Stoops Dean of the Rossier School of Education, he served as the Professor of Education and holder of endowed chairs at UCLA, boo, NYU, Harvard University, and the University of California, Berkeley. He's the author of 15 books. His most recent book, A Search for Common Ground, something we all need, conversations about the tough questions and complex issues confronting K-12 education in the United States today with Rick Hess, was the winner of the American Association of Publishers Prose Award in 2021. Dr. Noguera has served as an advisor to several states, school districts, foundations, and nonprofits. In 2022, he was appointed to President Biden's National Commission on Hispanics. In 2014, he was elected to the National Academy of Education and Phi Delta Kappa Honor Society. In 2020, he was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Noguera has received 8 honorary doctorates from American universities and received awards from the Center for the Advanced Study of Behavioral Sciences at Stanford University, the National Association of Secondary School Principals, and from McSilver Institute for Poverty Policy and Research at NYU for his research and advocacy efforts aimed at fighting poverty. In 2023, he ranked as the #1 in the nation for influence and impact in the field of education by Education Week. Welcome, Dean Noguera. Dr. Rudy Crew served as president of Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn, New York from 2013 to 2021. A lifelong educator and author, Dr. Crew's career has spanned the classroom to the chancellorship of the nation's largest school district, New York City Public Schools. In 2012, Dr. Crew was selected to serve as Oregon's first Chief Education Officer. Dr. Crew is a renowned leader and reformer who has made it his mission to improve student achievement, especially for poor and minority students. The Chancellor's District, the Parent Academy, and the School Improvement Zone are among Crew's innovations that are considered national models for reform. These successful strategies have engaged parents, business, and political leaders, and the community, ensuring that students achieve higher levels of success and are prepared for the global challenges ahead. Dr. Crew has served on numerous boards, including Lincoln Center for Performing Arts, Communities in School, the Al Shanker Institute, and the Public Education Network. He's the recipient of many awards, including the NAACP Educational Leadership Award, the Arthur Ashe Leadership Award, and the AASA National Superintendent of the Year. Dr. Crew's acclaimed book, Only Connect, The Way to Save Our Schools, continues to guide a vital public discussion about K-12 education. Welcome, Dr. Crew. Our second panelist is Dr. Paul Goethel, who's a graduate of Rossier, class of 2017. He began his career as a teacher for adjudicated youth in 1991 in the Los Angeles County Office of Education. Most recently, Dr. Goethel served as superintendent for the San Diego County Office over the past 7 years. During his tenure, the San Diego County Office of Education emerged as a state leader in not just supporting school districts in San Diego County, but other counties and districts throughout the state, the nation, and in some cases around the world. Prior to his tenure there, Dr. Goffel served as the superintendent for the Linwood Unified School District, where the district received numerous awards, including the College Board District of the Year, an honor bestowed to only 3 school districts across the nation annually. Linwood tripled their AP participation rates while simultaneously increasing passage rates for student groups intentionally left out of these options. Graduation rates went from 58% to 90% in the comprehensive high schools in Linwood, and he did this with his team by raising the expectations for children. And this was evidenced by one of the highest A through G completion rates in the state. Goffel has received the Executive Leadership Award for County Superintendent of the Year, the Justice Prudence Award for AESA Regional Superintendent for the country, and numerous state and local awards, with the most recent being the state recipient for Valuing Diversity and Equity from the Association of California School Administrators. He continues to mentor and coach sitting and aspiring superintendents and serves as an adjunct professor here at Rossier School of Education. Welcome, Dr. Goffel. And last and not least is my favorite county superintendent of the world, is Dr. Darlene Robles. Dr. Darlene Robles is the Associate Dean for the Office of Equity and Community Engagement and a professor of clinical education at the Rossier School of Education. Dr. Robles served 20 years as a superintendent in 3 public school organizations. She retired after serving 8 years as the Latina County Superintendent of the Los Angeles County Office of Education, the nation's largest regional educational services agency. As chief of the Salt Lake City School District for 8 years, she was recognized continuously for raising student achievement. Dr. Robles also served as the superintendent of the Montebello Unified School District, where she saved the district from a state takeover, something I witnessed with wonder from afar. Incredible work. Her career is focused on serving underserved students and inspiring and mentoring young educators. Dr. Robles has been recognized for her community involvement and educational accomplishments. Her most recent recognition was in 2022 by the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, MALDEF. In 2009 and again in 2011, Dr. Robles was named a top 100 influential Hispanic American. And in 2010, the Los Angeles County Commission for Women named her Woman of the Year. She served 6 years on President Obama's Advisory Commission on Educational Excellence for Hispanics. She's also a co-author of 2 books with Dr. Franco and Dr. Maria Ott, Now What? Confronting Uncomfortable Truths About Inequity in Schools, a Leadership Rubric for Action, and A Culturally Proficient Society Begins in School, Leadership for Equity. Please welcome Dr. Darlene Robles.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you all for being here. I guess you had to come as class. So, in case you haven't heard, there's an election coming up. And although education has been mentioned much in this campaign, we know that education has been politicized in many parts of the country. You all have chosen to take a step towards leadership. And some of you are in leadership roles already. And so we thought it would be valuable to you to get some wisdom from the leaders we've assembled. As you've heard, they've got, I don't know how many decades of experience between them, but many. And we won't ask them to show the scars to prove it, but I'm sure they could. So what we'd like them to do is talk for a bit about that experience, what they've learned, what they could share to future leaders, why this is still a worthwhile thing to do, right? And then we're going to open it up to you and also to the folks online. So I want to start there. As you reflect on your time in leadership, various leadership roles between the 3 of you, what do you think new leaders or emerging leaders need to know, particularly about navigating the very treacherous political terrain that we're in right now? So whoever's inclined, and then we'll work our way. Who feels like starting that? It's okay.
Don't start with ladies first.
Well, I don't know what you're looking at me. I'm
You just
happy.
play it.
Go
You
ahead.
know, I think first and foremost, the superintendency, regardless of politics, is one of the most important jobs in public education in the country. Because
1 second. Can everybody hear in the back?
Needs to speak louder.
We gotta go louder.
Coach
All right.
Coach's voice.
I am gonna be Dave Cash. I think first and foremost, the superintendency is one of the most important jobs right now in public education, because as superintendent in any leadership position, you're creating the conditions for a massive amount of people, and most importantly, for so many children. It's not more important than a teacher's job, but the conditions that you create first and foremost, and the moral conviction it takes to do this. And then I think that when you talk about the current climate, having a shared vision, being able to bring people together with diverse opinions and ideas and ideologies, and getting them to focus on the same thing and what's best for all kids and not some, is an extraordinary opportunity to build a durable system of practice, irregardless of what's happening around you. And to get Democrats and Republicans alike in the same room, even though they don't agree, to focus on children, to focus on those things that are important, is the job of the superintendent. And it's something that I've experienced firsthand in working for a district that was all Democrats, and then working as superintendent in a district, particularly during the culture wars, where we had spent 2 years working to listen to the communities that were intentionally left out of the margins, lifting up the voice of our kids, our communities. And we built this beautiful document that many of folks have seen called the Equity Blueprint, that it now feeds into the LCAP. And before this went to board is when the culture wars took shape. And that was not going to be acceptable. And so the work it took to keep them, reminding them of what we committed to, what our goals were for all children and not just some. Getting into relationship, not just with the board members who were facing pressure, but finding out where that pressure was coming from. And me getting into relationship with those constituents and those groups to say, this is what we're doing, this is why. Oh, it's not this. You know, we've somehow managed to get into this arena of fighting over terms. And instead of sitting at the table and listening to each other. You know, one of the things that I coached our folks are is just, you know, win the relationship, not the argument. It's a very simple task. We get in the task of listening, because if we're in it for the long game for our children, that's persuasion, that's influence. We don't do that by declaring and getting into that right away. So for me, it's the ability to value every human being, irregardless if you agree with them or not. Find out where they're coming from, because if I can get into a relationship with you, I might be able to change your thinking. And once we cut through all of that, we encouraged dialogue, we had groups, we had Moms for Liberty, we had the Freedom Fighters. I mean, we got into relationship with all of them. And at the end of the day, I think if you ask those folks, you know, what do you think of the San Diego County Office of Education? They would say, you know, I don't agree with everything they do, but they're in it for kids, and I respect that. They didn't disrupt, they didn't harm. But what Amanda Ripley would say, you walk into good conflict. You know, Tyrone Howard says this all the time. You don't tell your story, someone's going to tell it for you. So by honoring their voices, not committing, but honoring their voices, getting people together in a room and encouraging dialogue is almost more necessary now than to declare this is what's right for kids. Because at the end of the day, we weren't going to change what we were doing for our underserved kids. What we called it, don't know, but I will tell you, being proud of this board, they voted 5-0 for this document that became a leverage point for many county offices and districts to improve the conditions for kids. So I think the skill set is a little bit different, but I think the moral conviction, the courage, and the ability to work with every facet of our political system in relationship, but at the same time, keep your non-negotiables have to be your non-negotiables. And that needs to be expressed in life.
One more time, win the relationship, not the
Argument.
argument. All right, who's next? Rudy, Darlene?
Rudy keeps giving me the eye over this side, so I'll conclude. I think, adding to what Paul said, why not you, right? Why not you? Why not be the one that advocates for students, for your communities, for your families? Why not you? And why not you is because you care deeply about the future of our country, the future of children's lives.
Volume up.
Okay, I'll put my middle school problem. And why not you is how I look at it. And if you have a commitment to serving others and wanting the best for students and education, you wouldn't be in the EDL program if you didn't care about education. And our country needs you as leaders. Our children need you. Our families need you. And doing the things that Paul said really has to know what your why is. Why are you there? If it's about power, authority, ego, don't go in there.
That's right.
Because you'll be gone. It won't last. But really, it's a matter of, we need leaders who are willing to be the advocate for students when others are not. Be the advocate for teachers when others are not. Advocate for communities when others are not. Because we kind of assume that everybody in the community wants the best for our schools. As we know, there are less and less neighborhoods that have, or there's less people in neighborhoods that have children in schools. Yeah, we're asking them to support our children that don't look like them. And so how do we do that other than engaging with them and having them understand the importance of education? So again, it's understanding first your why you want to do it, because it is, I think, the best job ever. Because you see the big picture. You have to translate that big picture to people to how they matter in that world. So I think it's important to, as added, relationships are key. I use this, it's my training and interest-based bargaining with CPR, content, process, and relationships. People get the job for your content and your relationships, but process is so important. It's the middle of that. How you get to a decision, how you share that decision, who's involved, who's the ones that are making it happen for you. Because you could sit up here and say, I got the answer, but that answer is not going to be done with everybody around you. So bringing in people, as Paul said, inclusive, all diverse views. But I still go back to that question, why not you? To be the advocate for students who sometimes have not had a voice and families have not had a voice. And you can be that voice for those that, because others will have voice, you know, they know how to do it, they know how to work the system. But the majority of our communities don't know how to work that system that we've worked in. And so how do we have that system work for them without having them suffer as we figure this out?
I completely agree with my colleagues here. Can you hear me?
No.
That's your problem. I completely agree with my colleagues here and what they have shared. All I could add would be that this is a time in your life when you actually have to think like an artist. You have to be prepared to draw what does not exist on a canvas that is oftentimes very convoluted, somewhat uneven, not even available for everyone. And then the task is to get it approved by a system that never intended to do much right by children who are poor and of color and whose first language is not English. So that means you are an artist who will live in tension. You will live in tension. If your appetite is not high for tension, for living within, coping with, sort of rolling with the ambiguity of school districts, of county offices, of state government, of federal government. If you have no interest in that, this is such the wrong job for you. You know, go, you know, and there's a whole lot of stuff you can go do. It's just not this, right? Because this requires you to live at the intersection of race, class, gender, and money. And that street is littered with a lot of people who fundamentally have been trying to cross it, have been trying to upgrade it, have been trying to get more kids to qualify to live on it, or even to transfer the skills that they have to a whole nother neighborhood or street, metaphorically, right? So my hope would be that you grow to understand that part of leadership is living with the ambiguity of what you've been dealt, right? But then beyond that, it's to draw pictures of what it could be. And to create this artistry, you actually have to think so differently than, in many ways, than the way you may have even been trained. You have to literally think sort of asymmetrically, if you will. Which means that the system won't necessarily like you nor even understand you. It means the system is going to ultimately, in some cases, try to figure out how to repudiate you, how to denigrate you. And so my third suggestion would be buckle up and have a really strong sense of resilience. Right? This is a piece of artwork that there are going to be people who look at it and say, what the hell did you just do? And why did you do it? No one wanted those Haitian kids to be in the gifted program. Who told you that was a problem in our district? You have to actually understand that people are going to look at the piece of work you've done or are doing, and they're going to say, nah, not who we need in this job. And yet it takes me to my fourth one, which is persevere. This is, if you are in it for all the reasons that my colleagues suggested, if this is about the love you have of the human beings that we understand as being young children, young adults, if this is really about that, and if this is truly, if it's got a modicum of love connected to it, I mean, this may not be a part of tonight's class, but it is now. If it's got love connected to it, then you will have the necessary, sort of emotional prerequisite to lean into this work. And that's what really this job is asking you to do. It's asking you not to be a wallflower. It's asking you to lean into this work, to have the conversations that people generally don't want to have, to distribute money in ways that have never been distributed before, to reallocate power, reallocate positionality in ways that people actually can benefit from it, and to use the leverage of the superintendency to fundamentally alter the culture of an entire system. That is a wonderful piece of work. If you can put that on a canvas for 5 years, if you can do that, the test scores will take care of themselves. It's not about a number. It's not about getting something on a test that the state's going to give you a little piece of paper for. This is about you fundamentally helping other people, primarily teachers, parents, principals, people in the school community who want to do this work. They want to draw on that canvas just like you. They need permission. They need a culture that permits them to be artists. So I would just simply say, have at it, because I'm not going back into this. but do what we have done, which is to express your life on it. Put your life on that street, that intersection. Because if you don't want to do that, don't even try. Because people like us will see you and frankly call you out. How dare you get a degree out of this university with the conversation by this dean and countless other faculty members that are here, and some of whom are not, and then go out and punk out. If you do that, I mean, I cannot speak for my counsel, but I will definitely call you out. And we know who you are because we still got numbers.
All right, so, what I found that people learn well through story. So I'd like you to tell a story about a time in your vast experience when you've had to confront significant opposition to do what you knew was right and how you handled it. So no more platitude, just tell us the situation, what you did to get through that situation.
There's so many.
I'm trying to write.
Pick a good one.
Either the board voted against my recommendation. If that happened, but also when I.
Go louder, darling.
Well, I'm thinking of two right now, but one that, one was a community, I'm not sure, I'll share two, because it's very vastly different. I had just arrived in Salt Lake City, January of 1994, we know how long ago it was. And culture wars were already starting there, and I get a phone call from the high school principal. I'm gonna give you the context of Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City has a very unique view of high schools. High schools are their life. If you went to East High School, you were like a star. That's where they filmed that summer high school musical. So Roseanne Barr went there too, so I know about it. But East High School had the wealthiest community. I mean, called the East Bench.
Hey, could we have the panelists stand up when they talk?
Folks
I'm
in the
sorry.
back can't hear, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll stand.
Thank you so much.
So Salt Lake City had 4 high schools, and East High was the premier school. And the principal, Kay, calls me and says, Darlene, when you were in Montebello in LA, did you ever have to work with a student wanting to form a gay alliance? I said, yes. Well, we have one here. And what's the problem? And he said, well, you know, we have, what's the policy? The board had not adopted a policy, so we had to follow the equal access law. And the equal access says if you have curricular clubs only, that's fine. But if you have extracurricular clubs, you all know this. You have to allow non-curricular clubs. I said, absent the policy, they have to exist. They have an advisor. And I was only on the job maybe 2 months. And the way they had it there at East High, I had this group called the Board of Control Students. And they are the ones that made the decision. Don't ask me why they were the ones making the decision, but they did. And the political connection that I had to deal with in Salt Lake was amazing because Governor Levitt, at that time, son was part of that. So he called me on the phone. And he said to me, Darlene, you can't have that happen. It's the law. I'm gonna make it happen. I said, you could, look at the congressional record. Senator Hatch even said that, our senator at the time, US senator. And he, the thing that I worked hard to do was to convince my board or work to convince my board that what the students want was to be seen. They wanted to have a sense of belonging and they wanted to be seen because the culture was so oppressive for students who did not look like students thought the community thought they should look like. And so we were working on that culturally, but then we had to have a hearing because the board was going to adopt the policy. We had several meetings that had hundreds of people show up, hundreds. And this is the sad part, is that the board at that time voted 4-3 to ban all curricular clubs. It was, how do I make this right, the superintendent, right? How do I make this right? And we did a lot to make it right because we brought community leaders, the students came together and they said, we're going to embrace those students. We brought in different organizations to work with the community, work with everybody and make sure that they understood that this, first of all, was a bad decision. But the vote was pretty much on religious lines, 4-3. Fast forward, they did reverse it. But what I learned at that time is that I had to do more work to inform about the harm that students were going to face. which led me to another problem that I faced 2 years later, is doing the research on the district. Why students, particularly Latino students and ELs and non-EL, but EL as well, students they were scoring very low and they weren't completing their units. So I did an analysis of all the district of the schools, the high schools. And what I noticed is that because of income, our students were moving different ways, different schools. So they may have been at West High School, they may have gone to East High School, and Highland Park High School. And so when I did more research and studying, I realized that somebody made a decision that all the high schools could be on different schedules. So East would have been a quarter schedule, Highland was on a semester schedule, and West was on a trimester schedule. So when students moved, they were missing courses, or they had already passed it and they would not pass after that and not get the credits. So I took on the union and I took on the high school teachers. How many are high school teachers? You're a tough group. And what I said to the board is that there isn't any reason that you can give me that they can't be on the same schedule. So when they transferred, now context for Salt Lake City, they had been in site-based decision-making for 20 years. They took it to the point it was individual classroom site-based, which didn't make sense. I had to convince the board to take that back and be responsible for the decisions that they were making. It took me almost a year and a half to get the board to do that. And we changed the high school schedule. We had every high school there were teachers screaming at us, yelling at us, but there was a conviction that I gave the board and myself that we're harming students. Schedules don't teach, teachers teach. And if our low-income community and students are moving, we have to address that. That changed, decreased my dropout rate by 8%. I went down to 9% from 18%. And that was to me important because the students could learn, but they couldn't catch up with that. So it's understanding that you're going to take a stand with the governor and Senator Hatch, or with the high school and the unions to do what's right by kids. And that I think is what we're saying, is that you're willing to do that regardless of the consequences and regardless of the scars on your back. You have to hold firm to what you believe in for the students that you serve. No one was advocating for them. The teachers were advocating for their schedule. Schedules don't teach. I can't tell you how many times I said that. Teachers teach. What's the difference between trimester? They gave me reasons. I didn't fall for it. They gave me reasons. I just said, we're going to come together and select one schedule. I don't care what it is, one schedule. And they went to semester at the end. Okay. No fun.
So I had the distinct honor and pleasure of working for Dr. Robles in the Los Angeles County Office of Education. And really what we did is we grabbed on to every child who had been pushed out of the system, expelled, probation, incarcerated, and we loved them up. We loved them up and we prepared them for college. That's the way I was. This is without research or anything. And we did that. We didn't just get our kids off the streets and through school. We got them through school and we got them into college. So when I went to work for the comprehensive school system, imagine my shock and dismay that we were sorting kids, we were labeling kids, we were putting them in all these different courses based on adults' perceptions of what they could and could not do. And coming into Linwood, the district was failing. It had the worst schools in the state of California, as evidenced by lowest performing, financially mess, you name it. And what we did was we built a coalition. We got parents, the mayor, we got everybody together and said, what do we want for a child in Linwood? And what do you think the parents said? We want access for our kids to go to college. Very simple, right? Not so much. Because when you take a look at schedules and you take a look at programming, you find that half of the kids even had access So we began the process of just educating people, having meetings and putting our folks together to say, this is what a kid in Linwood's gonna look like. Because they're gonna be prepared for college. If they choose not to go, it's gonna be their choice and not the system. So imagine unwinding these methods of tracking, opening access to AP, allowing any kid to take it who wanted it, and providing the supports underneath and the training, moving away from a current system into only A through G approved courses so that children could be eligible. So there was no more consumer math. There was no more of these dumbing down classes, 3 years of math, and you're gonna have to take, you're gonna have to take the gamut. There was a concentrated effort, as my colleagues shared, of just this relentless gravitational pull to the status quo. It's there. It's conditions that have been built for years before us and after us, unless you're willing to step into it and say, this is not okay. It's not okay for our kids. And so we had parents, I don't want my kids with those kids, with teachers, they're not academically ready. You have to get in conversation with all of these groups in different ways and different methods to stay the course of what you think is just so important for our children. One of the things that we did that was, I think, smart is preempt the board. We knew that they were going to get pushback, and we were relentless in giving them the information to deal with that pushback. And they did, to their credit, they stayed the course. You know, and one of the results are EL, special ed, all of these groups that were suffering academically showed the highest group are Black kids. Everybody, because now they had access. Amazing things happen when you group your kids heterogeneously and give them the same course of study. But as John Powell would say, all of our kids are situated differently, so their needs are different. And to provide those supports underneath. But we were relentless about not budging from higher section. In the first 2 years of implementation, we had the highest growth of any district in the state of California. We didn't try to make our test scores better. We gave kids what they needed and deserved. That type of coalition building, of getting a district to steer this ship, to come up with a system of practice from boardroom to classroom and staying the course, came with a lot of pushback. But our belief was so strong. We had our non-negotiables. We were not willing to bend from them. And, you know, I was laughing when Dr. Robles said, which one do you pick? Because I don't know, there's so many. And I don't look at these as problems. I look at these as opportunities, because I really do believe that people don't know what they don't know. I mean, that's part of our job is to inform, to influence, to persuade. If we accept the pushback, our kids lose. Our kids lose right away. You have to know what that thing is inside that just burns where you're not. No, that's going to create, as Dr. Robles said, that's going to create harm for our kids. That's a non-negotiable, and this is why. You know, I was just thinking as she was talking that, you know, when the unaccompanied minors came to our state, I got a phone call on the weekend from Homeland Security, said, can you teach 1,500 unaccompanied minors? Can you create a school? Okay. What's my timeline? 4 days. Okay. Put it, had an emergency meeting with staff over the weekend. They did a marvelous job of constructing a beautiful school that they call Futuro Brillantes. This is 1,500 kids, some of them reunited with their parents who've been separated, some of them looking for a sponsor, some of them looking for a family member who had gone through probably something that none of us, I shouldn't say that, I don't want to assume that, but the level of trauma and fear that they all came with. And when we built this school, guess what? That was not okay for a large section of our county, and Homeland Security said, they said, look, I know you're getting beat up. It made national news, was getting death threats and the whole nine. And they said, we can shut it down if you want. I said, what are you talking about? This is what we do. We wouldn't shut it down at all. I see the faces on our kids. They love school. They love coming to school. It was in a convention center. You just have to believe in what you believe. And stick by it, no matter what, as has been said. This was something that still to this day, that my colleagues at the San Diego County Office of Education say was one of the most profound and important things they have ever done. And how much it filled their soul. Because of these young people coming in and getting a glimmer of hope. Everything in the rule book said, shut it down. Every ounce of political pressure outside said, shut it down. No way, this is what we do.
I think the notion that there are so many in our lives that we could story tell about, should give you a lot of information about how complex this is. Mine would be the most complex system I've ever run, which is New York City. It was at the time run by my team and under the auspices of a mayor, Mayor Giuliani, who had his own notion of what ought to happen for education in his city. And from the very day that I met Rudy, he was very clear that he really didn't care about how we got to an end game. What he cared about was that I did what he expected and wanted me to do. Now, you have all worked either with school boards or with principals or superintendents who have a very clear sort of footprint about what they believe or what they want to do. And you get either the implicit notion or the explicit conversation that says, hey, do that, right? So what I said before about artistry, it takes all that right off the table, right? It just says, do what I tell you to do. Rudy was exactly that. He was very dogmatic. It was, and by the way, I don't much care about the kids north of, I don't know, north of 96th Street. He knows what this is.
Uptown.
Uptown. I don't much care about the kids in the Bronx. I don't really care. They don't vote for me. Their parents don't vote for me. So whatever you do there doesn't make any difference to me. Whatever you do with the kids in Harlem doesn't make any difference to me. Whatever happens for the kids who just recently immigrated here, not my problem. If you want to do something that essentially will affect the voting parents of New York City. Right? And I thought about it for a long time, and I thought, well, first of all, I don't know who votes and who doesn't. But second of all, what are you talking about? And, this is like, I don't even understand that language. You're nuts. And I had many conversations with him every Monday about what I was going to do. And one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to create a separate district to start responding to what essentially was about a third of the schools, about 1,200 schools in New York City at the time. And about 400 of those schools were really very severely low performing. They were in the poorest sections of New York, just like they are here in California, just like they are in any place in America. You can go to Detroit, you can go to Santa Barbara, you can go any place you go to where there's high poverty, there's generally low performing schools. And what I decided was that I wanted to create a district, a separate district that would enable a very different kind of interaction among teachers. A totally different interaction, not bound by rules of contract, not bound by any, if you will, sort of previous practice that was ordained by the mayor or by somebody else. I wanted people to grow their thinking organically. I wanted them to be a team. And I wanted them to do it quickly. This 4-day thing is exactly right. You don't have a lot of time because these kids have a minimal amount of years or months actually in a grade. So the question was, how do you do this on the quick? I met with the union president in New York, a woman by the name of Sandy Feldman, who, God rest her soul, is now passed. But Sandy said, Rudy, I want desperately to do something dramatic. I want something different in New York. And I want teachers to be able to do it differently. But I can't make them do it. And your principals are not going to be able to make them do it. So you as chancellor, you're going to have to create something that allows them to do something imaginative and very different as it relates to their teaching in classrooms. And the chancellor's district was a way of being able to say, number one, if you want to go to that district, you're going to now I'm going to now pay you 20% more time, 20% more money for 20% more time. So I changed the pay scale for the teachers in the district, number one. The second thing I did was to say, you don't have to go. You can volunteer to go. And as a matter of fact, the only people I want in the chancellor district are people who want to be there. Anybody who doesn't want to be there, I am not going to involuntarily transfer you, nor can your principal send you there. The third thing we did was we said, you need to have some learning time to actually build a new strategy, a new methodology, a new think about how to teach children. So you need to kind of do the etch-a-sketch, erase some of what you know, and build a new knowledge base on how would you now work with kids who are English language learners, who are not, if you will, have not been in school for a number of days or months or years, et cetera. The energy that came by virtue of teachers getting a chance to actually go in a school for the first time that they were not assigned to, that they got a chance to pick. It was empowering. We had people go to schools all throughout New York City, some of the toughest, what we call hard to staff schools. I found teachers who wanted to go there in a heartbeat. Why? Because they wanted to do something extraordinary. They wanted to draw on that canvas I talked about earlier. They wanted freedom to be, if you will, sort of away from the conventional wisdom of, rote learning in a textbook, sit down, here's how I have to actually organize my curriculum and so on and so forth. We gave them that, and we gave them training from NYU and from a number of other colleges, Teachers College and so on and so forth in New York City. So they got an opportunity to earn more money. They got an opportunity to teach the way they wanted to teach, organize classrooms the way they wanted to organize these classrooms. And ultimately, there was essentially a sense of relief that these were schools that were now going to get lifted up. Rudy Giuliani said, don't do that. I don't want any part of that. These teachers have to do it the way I went to Catholic school. Right? And I remember having this conversation with him in which I was trying to say to him, Rudy, but you hired me to be the educational leader. I know what I'm talking about here and what they're describing as being the way by which to do this, the pedagogy of if you will, the oppressed students. That's going to work. If you let these people do what they're talking about doing, reading scores will go up, math scores will go up, attendance will go up. You don't have to worry about that. You can take all the credit, but let me have the canvas. Let me have the canvas. And by the way, if you don't want me to have the canvas, then you know what? Give me my money and let me walk out of here today. Right? There's a time when, to your point, there's a time when you actually have to put yourself in a position of saying, I got this job, but I can just easily leave it. Right? Be prepared. The second you get the job, be prepared to cut it loose. Because always there are going to be moments like that where someone puts you between this place where you don't necessarily have any choice but to essentially be who you really are in your heart. And if your heart dictates that we're gonna move in this direction, then you've got to have the power to do that, even if that power means that you have to go foursquare with the mayor or the city council or the superintendent or the principal or whomever it may be. Do it in a dutiful, thoughtful, meaningful way, but so don't be callous about it, don't be arrogant about it, but do it. Because that's what this courageous conversation is really all about. They let me create the Chancellor's District. Rudy just essentially said, I'm not gonna put any money into it. You redo the money any which way you want to in your budget. But you go and you create that. We put 15 of the lowest performing schools together in about 3 different districts of New York City, 3 different areas of New York City. Those 15 then multiplied to about 45 the following year. And then the following year, we had well over 150, almost 200 schools in the Chancellor's District. The test scores for that ultimately went through the roof. If anybody cared about that, which is not what I was happy about necessarily, but it was a consequence of exactly what my colleague just simply said, right? When people are doing the work that revolves around their passion, when they're really invested in their own learning, when they're really connecting to the work, the relationship IQ goes up. And teachers and students feel that relationship, and by God, there are miracles that begin to happen in attendance and in performance, and so on and so forth. So Rudy then took credit for that. Rudy was so happy that the test scores went up. The state was no longer going to take over these schools. There were professors all over New York City who were very, very happy about the fact that finally something has happened in New York that, you know, is going to ultimately change the paradigm of teaching and learning and so on and so forth. All of that may be true, but what really mattered to me more than anything else was when I'd go to these schools and see what was happening in these schools, there was joy in these classrooms. There was joy. Teachers were using artwork as a medium for language development. People were actually thinking about math problems by virtue of doing stuff out on the parking lot or in a garden that they had designed, or they were doing rooftop explanations of aerodynamics and all manner of things that were nowhere in the New York State curriculum, right? And that joy is one of the things that I think I take away more than anything else from the time of spending with Rudy and trying to convince him of the efficacy of trying to do this kind of work. It's just that on behalf of those faces, on behalf of those teachers and those children who were so frankly involved in their own learning, so committed to their own learning, I take a bullet for that. You know, I really would, because that was frankly, that was me. That was you. That was 1,000 other people in New York and 1,000 other people in Sacramento and Linwood and, you know, Utah and all these. This is what America needs is places where children can experience that in a classroom. And teachers have to experience it in order for children to experience it. So I am proud of that moment. I took frankly a behind whipping for it, you know, because Rudy ultimately got very upset about the fact that it was working, and, you know, I spent a lot of money on it. I finally had to ask him for some more money. He was put in a position of having to spend more money than he wanted to reinstate all the arts in New York City. He didn't want to do that. More kids than the kids north of 96th Street got it, right? 4 Black kids got it in Brooklyn. Kids who were recently immigrated to New York City got it, on and on and on. So he was not happy about that. But at the end of the day, there was joy in the land of being able to do that. And that was what I cared most about. And therefore, as far as I'm concerned, it was a success.
Well, I'm gonna ask one more question. Start thinking about what you want to ask, okay? Because we're gonna open it up in a moment. So we've been hearing these very inspiring stories of leadership, and I hope that people are taking notes, because I think there's a lot of wisdom being shared here. What about regrets? Things that you wish, I wish I could have done that over. that didn't turn out the way I hoped. And I asked that because it's easy to see the three of you and say, okay, well, they knew it, they did it all right, but I'm sure there have been times when it didn't turn out quite the way you hoped for. So willing to share any of those stories?
There's a lot of that. A lot of that.
Whoever's ready.
I'll go, because I got too many of them on this. Running me up. Again, I could do this in Sacramento where I was superintendent, or Tacoma, Washington, and these places, but the ones that are, for me, the most troubling, that I've never been able to let go of, especially now because it's so sort of partially in the news now. I was invited to a dinner one night. The mayor invited me to dinner. He said, I've got somebody I want you to meet. I want you to do me a favor. I said, what's the favor? He said, I can't tell you now. We'll tell you at dinner. But I want you to go and I want you to just meet this guy. I went, very swanky hotel in New York. And I get there and down the steps walks Donald Trump. And he came in, sat down, we introduced each other, sat down at the table, and he immediately began to pontificate about something which was so boring at the time. I don't remember what it was. But immediately we got to this conversation about I want to do something on behalf of the public schools in New York. And I said, okay, like what? And he said, well, I want to give a gift. I want to give a gift. I said, oh, okay. And I had been trying to raise money for the reinstatement of the arts, so I didn't have to ask him mayor for money. So I thought, well, this is a great give and get, right? I mean, what do you want to do, with this money? So I was telling him about the Chancellor's District. I was telling him about the reinstatement of the arts and so on and so forth. And he said, no, I don't do anything like that. He said, I want to come to a very large middle school or a high school. And I want to make the announcement of what I want to do. I don't want to tell you about it tonight, but it's going to be fabulous. It is coming, right? It's going to be fabulous. He said, you just line up the school and the principals and the students, you get them in an auditorium, it's going to be fabulous. I said, well, all right. I'm looking at Rudy at dinner over the table, and I'm thinking to myself, are you going to give me some cues here about whether or not I'm going, should I go for this or not? And no cues at all. It was kind of, I'm reading the menu. So I said, well, why don't we do this? I'll identify the school. You tell me the date when you want to actually come to that school. And then we'll have a conversation about what's going to happen. All right. So I identified very large middle school in the Bronx, primarily Black and brown neighborhoods. About 1,000, almost 1,500 students in this one school. And I call the principal. I tell the principal, got this donor, I didn't give him his name, got this donor who wants to provide something for the kids. They want to have an auditorium. Here, can you give me some dates when you think this might work? They gave me dates. I called the mayor back. I gave him the dates. And he then gets Donald Trump on the line. And the three of us are having this three-way conversation. And he said, I'm going to deliver something that every one of these kids is going to want. He said, tell me what color they are. I said, what color who is? He said, I want to know what kind of neighborhood are these kids coming from? I said, well, they're primarily, black and brown. They're the Latinx and African-American kids, kids whose first year of English, first language may not necessarily be English, but it's a big school. You said you wanted a big school. Here it is. He said, that's perfect. That's perfect. He said, I want you to have the media there that day. Right? Now, this is again, reflection, right? When somebody asks you to have the media there, every instinct in your body should be worried. Every instinct in your body, every alarm bell should go off in your mind, because why would somebody in our business, other than if it's really great breaking news, why would you want the media there and they're not part of your team? Right? So we get to the day of this event, and I didn't even have to ask the media. They heard it from the mayor's office. So he is the one who then contacted the media. Get to the middle school, we get there, and I'm thinking, it's gotta be, talking to the principal, it's gotta be, there are gonna be scholarships for the kids who are here. If you finish school, you get through high school, you're gonna get a free scholarship to NYU or some four-year institution or whatever. That's what's in my mind. You got all this money, you got this big multimillionaire guy. It's the only thing it can be. And the principal leaned over to me on the stage and said, Rudy, I got a bad feeling. And I said, and I regret this to this day, I said, don't worry, I got this covered, right? Part leaning in, wanting to, I'm just trying, come on, principal, stay with me here. Don't abandon me in this moment, because we're both up on this stage and you can't look disappointed, right? This idiot, no. This guy gets up, grabs the microphone and says to all these black and brown children, I have a great surprise for everybody in here. And one of the things you're going to get, the thing that you want most in your life, the thing that's going to improve your life, and I remember these words, the thing that's going to improve your life. Everybody here is going to get a free pair of sneakers. And I looked at this man and I looked at the principal. And I remember saying to I'm going to say what I said to myself. This is the most racist SOB I have ever in my entire life. How could you? How could you say this to these children? This is your station in life, is to wear a pair of these stupid friggin' sneakers. And they went through some logistical nightmare of, now we got to figure out what size you wear, what, on and on and on. And the place just disassembled into pure mayhem, right? And the principal looked at me and said, you got this, huh? I don't even go to that school when I go back to New York. I don't even talk to people up there, because this is an embarrassment. It was an embarrassment to me. It was a shameful moment, but it wasn't so much just my shame. It was the shame of people who enabled this to happen. I was so angry with the mayor. I was so angry with Trump. I was so angry with me, with my own self, and so there is a place where, I just say my thing to myself, to err is to be human. You got to learn how to forgive yourself. But follow your instinct here. I should have told that man when he first started talking to me about coming to a middle school, and he asked me what color the kids were. I should have known then. You know what? This is a joke. Until you tell me what you're going to give these kids, this is we're not going to do this. I'm still looking for revenge.
4 weeks away, Dr. Cruz.
Voila.
I do not have a great story like that. just putting it out there. You know, I think that if I were to capture the essence of just some general things that I regret, that hopefully this may resonate if those of you who are going to be superintendents. But I've always worked with the board and kind of established a system of the art of no surprises. You know, they answer to constituents and as things happen in school systems, which lots of things happen, you know, I can think of two instances where I'm kind of a big picture guy and I'm not real good with the details. This is one of the things that I've always struggled with and having to pay attention to that. And so I can think of two instances where the board found out something through the newspaper and not through communication channels with us. And that is just not okay. And so the learning experience for me was to tighten up the communication from our staff and cabinet to bubble that up so I could make sure that the board was informed and it didn't damage the relationship or anything like that. And you know, when I think about just, if I were to capture this regret, like how much more could I have done in the seat? I mean, honestly, because the way that I live and breathe this work, if 100% of our kids aren't successful, it's just not okay. I sit with that sometimes. What could I have done more? As much progress as we made in so many areas, what could I have done more? Where did I need to put my time? Where I have the biggest impact and the biggest payoff? I mean, one of the things I'm deeply proud of is, you know, as a county soup, there's 42 districts in San Diego County. We're the 43rd. We are the 43rd district because we serve kids. We serve the unserved. Kid victims of trafficking, homeless, foster. We had 26 schools. And I always said we were the 43rd district because I didn't want our kids to be unnoticed and forgotten just because they had been pushed out of the system. You know, and one of the things that I reflected on recently is the San Diego Tribune published an article and ranked all 43 districts and the number of kids who graduated last year, who were enrolled today in college. In the San Diego County Office of Education, our kids who were incarcerated, community schools, expelled, we were 6th out of the 43 districts. 70% of our kids our graduates were enrolled in college the next year. Could I have done more to influence and change and support? Because we should not, that defies all odds. I'm deeply proud of it. But why should that be reflective of our county? I don't know. I don't know. But that was an expectation. You go into the camps and halls where our kids are locked up. They're all taking community college classes online. Why not? We afford that to other children. But I think that the most important thing, if we talk about regrets, what did you learn from it and what did you do differently? And the things that I can think of, which are many, I learned from them just to be a better leader, a better in relationship, better with my board, better with staff, every single time in the service of our kids. Every single time. It has to benefit students. So.
Mine's gonna sound like an odd regret. I was appointed superintendent of Montebello Unified School District right at the brink of their collapse budget twice. It was 1990 and I was an assistant soup and we were brought into the cabinet around Christmas time. And the superintendent at that time had been there a long time, well-respected, great guy, liked him a lot. And he did a lot because he buffered the board from us. He took care of that. And he told us we're going bankrupt. He said, we're going bankrupt and we need items. And I can be flippant sometimes. I said, you mean I won't have money for Christmas? You know, joking. You give me a dirty look. I said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. But we were gonna go bankrupt. And so January comes around and he starts meeting with everybody in groups about the budget. And I did speak up a few times in our cabinet and he invited all. He had two cabinets. One is immediate staff, was his assistant soups, and then he brought others, principal reps and meetings and things. And there were people who still were in denial about the budget. One of them was a business manager. Don't ask me why he was in denial, but he came in wanting to do something for some other schools. And I spoke up. I said, we're bankrupt. You can't build that. We have to meet payroll. So we struggled with that. And the superintendent kept getting a lot of criticism because every month there was a different number that they had to cut. 10 million, 20 million. Our budget was about 200 million, 180, something like that. I can't remember, but up there. And 25 million, 30, you know, it was a moving target, and the union, everybody was upset. So it was very clear that John had to leave. So John left, retired, and sad because he was a good guy. And they appointed me superintendent. I was proud to be there. I had grown up in the community, grew up in East Valley, Montebello, knew the community. My son graduated from that school. Relatives, it was my home. I lived not more than a mile away. I could walk if I wanted to. It was my home, very involved in the city, connected to the community. Started my teaching career there, wanted to end my career there. So I met with I hired a new business manager, Brent Shepherd, and I were very great work together. And I said, before I go out there with a number, I want to know the bottom line. I am not going to go back and have a new target. They had to cut $42 million. So the things that were easy to do were done. The hard things we couldn't do. And that's when I got to know Laco, and I got to know the gospel, and everybody was there. And we struggled for about 2 years with students leaving me notes on my phone, telling me off about why I was doing this. We dismantled amazing programs. Montebello was known as a lighthouse district, one of the highest paying districts. I can tell you what caused the problem. Does it matter though? The problem is there. And so I spent 2 years literally, the only days off I had were Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and Thanksgiving. Glenn and I spent 2 years just intensely figuring out how we were going to survive and make it, because we were committed, the state was not going to take us. We were not going to be taken over by AB 1200. I remember that time State Superintendent Honig, maybe some of you know him. He called me. At first I thought he was congratulating me, and he was doing the BS of doing that. He already appointed a state trustee. So the following year I go to the accident, and I remember, I can't remember his name. It comes to my shoulder like this. I'm going to be the state trustee, and I said, no, my dead body will be the state trustee. No, we're going to do the hard. And we did. We cut 42 million. We actually changed, we beat CTA on this lawsuit about hiring and bypassing for those that were certified to teach EL students. We actually took money back from our employees. We had to increase class size. I reorganized the high school teachers. They were fine with the beginning of the school year because if you give me 40 students, there'll be 20 by the time the enrollment comes around. I reorganized I reorganized classes for the second semester.
Yeah.
You're not gonna play that game on me. I'll reorganize, you'll have 40 again, and everybody, if you leave, is gonna have to come to me. You are not gonna play those games with me. They were furious, they were upset. By the third year, we were, okay, we met, we had a review, the AB 1200, and we were coming back with little by little. Still not where we wanted to be. I still hadn't paid back the teachers. So the fourth year, they renewed my contract after my third year, they renewed my contract. So it's 93, 94. And we're finally, okay, programs are coming back. We're paying back our teachers. We could breathe. People were feeling a little bit better. And at that time in November, the board turned over. People were angry, rightfully so, they were angry. 3 board members, I think one didn't run, 2 lost. So it's three brand new board members came in. And I'm gonna say this with the dearest love that I have for every Latino that I know. There were 3 Latinos that came in. One I had a history with already, because when I was assistant superintendent, he was the brother of a state senator. And one board member promised him a job. And his job was to do communications, so he met with me every week. And then he brings this is part why we went bankrupt. One of the reasons, he came with a contract and said, sign it. We haven't done it. Well, I'm gonna retain her. I said, I'm not signing this. You did nothing. I said, if John wants to sign it, go ahead, sign it. So that's how I met him, right? So then he's on the board. He remembers I didn't sign it, the superintendent signed it, but I was not gonna sign it. Because to me, you have to get $1 for work. It's transactional. You don't just sit there and have me sign off when you've done nothing. So he was on the board. And then 2 others that I knew from the community. And it was that time of year, they just got reelected. And so that's December, when the board comes on. Comes January, February, March, it's time to hire new principals. Which we hadn't done in a while because of the budget cuts. We were asking people to do double duty. We're doing this because I couldn't hire. So we have a process like all of us do. You know, we have a committee for the school and they bring people in and they review the applicants. HR does the first round. They did the second round. So they had 10 to interview. And they narrowed it down. My only request was that you send me 2 to 3. Because you're hiring for the district. I know we're hiring for Winter Gardens Elementary School, maybe, but I may move them later on, they can move around, so they were fine with that, everything was fine. So they send me around May, the 3 names. So one board member comes to see me in my office. Darlene, where are you in the process? I said, well, I have the list I'm interviewing. Well, you have to hire X name, the name's in my book, if you want to see it, the name, I won't say it, because it's being recorded. You have to hire this young man, because we promised his city councilman, his father, that he would be, we promised him, if he helped us get elected, he would be, the next principal. Oh, really? I said, that doesn't work that way. I'm not gonna do it. But the other board member comes in. And the other board members. So I knew I had 2 or 3 votes, right? So I said, okay. You are the employer, you hire. What I regret, and you'll know this, Paul, because you worked in Montebello after me, and you know the board politics that were there. My regret is that I didn't have either the appropriate language or the influence or the whatever to convince them to do what was right. Even though I told them what message they were giving to the community, everything that we had gone through, that you have to, you know, it's a transactional, the people who worked hard, that are capable, because I told them the person you want of the 10, he's 10. Why would you want him? My regret, because I love my community, I wanted to stay there. And I had committed to it and I thought it was gonna be there my entire, and it ended up being a slippery slope, but for the next 10, 15 years. Because I still have family in that community. I still live there even when I returned from Salt Lake. I still live in that community. And people still tell me, Darlene, you were the smart one, you left. Because even the city politics stuff, it's a mess. That's my regret, is I didn't have at that time, I don't even know if I have them now, the skills to convince the board that what they were doing was not only unethical, but harmful to children and to the broader community. That's my biggest regret. I don't regret leaving. I had a great experience in Salt Lake. I mean, I loved it, wonderful, but that's my biggest regret because I saw Montebello over the years just just go down that slippery slope to where kids weren't the focus. The kids were not the focus at all. It was all about political transactions. And so principals that I knew just kind of hunkered down, leave me alone. Board members were running the show, whatever they want, the superintendent was going this way, trying to figure that out. And that was my regret. I don't know if I could have changed it, but that was my regret, is that I could not convince the board at that time to do what was right.
Thanks, Dylan. So let's. They've been very candid in sharing their stories with us, both the good and the bad. We have time for some questions, and I know Darlene has to leave. You say some questions, okay, so we'll open it up, and if there are people online, if you could, someone who's help, you can help field them. All right, but anybody. Yes, back here.
Rudy Crew, thank you for being here. After the unfortunate fiasco with the last story you just shared, clearly had to communicate to the rest of the school district about it. What were some points that you used to essentially assuage maybe some concerns that constituents would have had after that happened?
You mean after the sneaker incident?
That's one.
You still sound sneaky.
Yeah. Yeah, it is very timely. I called a meeting with every one of the high school and middle school principals in New York City. And it's like 400 people, 400 high school, middle school people. And I called a meeting to apologize. I just threw myself on my sword. I truly love the people that I was working with. They did not always agree with me and I didn't always agree with them, but they were part of a journey during that era. And they were taking the journey with me. We hit a very bad place around this incident here with the sneakers, because I actually used my credibility with the principal to get her to lean in with me. And she got smashed in the face. And I didn't see it coming. I should have read it better. But I apologize to the entire secondary folks, because I wanted them to understand, I knew that this was not right. This was not right. And to this day, I still hear from people. I know a number of people that, have, moved to Florida and different places and so forth, and we stay in touch. And we can laugh about it now, given the state of politics in the United States, but it sure as heck wasn't funny then. And I sent a letter out to parents, because this was parents came to the day of the thing, because I truly thought it was about scholarships. I truly thought your kid's gonna get a scholarship, but if they gotta finish school, or they gotta have a certain attendance record or whatever. So I sent a letter out to the community. There were about 9 different districts up in that area, that I just sent out a blanket letter to everybody saying I was very sorry for what essentially turned out to be kind of a joke. I don't know that I've ever really let it go, to be perfectly honest with you, which is why I tell the story now, because it's where I said that intersection of race and class and gender, right? It's the anti-equity, right? And it's so violative, it hurts so badly to know that you participated in something that was against your own principle, that I still feel badly about it. I actually almost didn't tell you about it tonight for fear, you know what I mean? Somebody will slash my tires.
That's good. Some more questions, comments? Yes, way back. I'll get you next.
Quick question for you guys. And like from what you guys were saying, a lot of it was working with like your team. But how do you get community buy-in? Like, what are steps you can take to get the parents to get involved, the families to get involved? Like, how do you bring in the community to get this system that is meant to keep those that are underserved and marginalized on the side, to get those people that are constantly powerless to reclaim that power?
I mentioned the example of the equity blueprint. This was an intentional effort to bring in those who hadn't had a voice. So establishing, a Black advisory committee, Latinx advisory. We call it socially conscious leadership. It's being in relationship differently. The traditional model is folks come into a district, do things on behalf of parents and kids and community, even with the best intentions. But our folks have great ideas. They have lived experiences. They have hopes. They have dreams. And unless, I love that Buddhist term mundita, the beginner's mind. If you're new to that community, it's heart-centered listening. What do you need? What's important to you? What's working? What isn't? This is not a bake sale. This isn't, hey, we're gonna have a meeting and we're gonna go over title, whatever requirements. That's nothing. Those are transactional opportunities. If you're a culturally competent leader, isn't that empathy, isn't that care, isn't that love, isn't that a deep appreciation for every human being that has a vested interest in that school? You don't get that unless you project that light and love of being at the table and honoring every voice in that community is where you start to build those bridges. I always talk to our board and even school officials. The actions you take today, some of these things start a fire or they build a bridge. Which one are you going to be responsible for? We have to be better about what we call heart-centered listening. There's opportunities to co-construct things where now your greatest allies are those that have been left outside the market. But it starts with that concern and care. It starts with your resonating with another human being that you care deeply about, not just you, your children, and everything that the school has to offer. What can we do differently? Because it's not working right now. And the second you build that trust, you have community engagement. People show up, but it's for a very different purpose. It's not going to inform them about the next federal requirements or our new shared decision-making model or all these technical aspects that our folks get grounded. Go back to being human. Our schools can be dehumanizing. You have an opportunity to work against that. Chronic absenteeism is it's not our kids. It astounds me how educators sit in a room and make decisions on behalf of kids and families with this deficit mindset that it's our children and we gotta visit more and we gotta call. What? Why don't you ask them? I ask the kid all the time. Why should I go to that class? The teacher thinks I'm stupid. I'm getting an F anyway. They won't let me turn in a mark. That's data. If schools, we have an opportunity to make schools relevant, to be a beacon of hope. That's on us. We got to look in the mirror, not out the window. We do that first by understanding what our parents and kids need. Right, so.
Okay, let's right here, and then we got two online.
So, I know all of you have, your experience in K-12, and some of you now have shifted to higher education, like Medgar Evers College and here. I'm curious, how have your experience working in the K-12 system, the tools that you've learned throughout the years, how has that helped you with that shift to higher education? And did you find it challenging to make that shift coming from a K-12 system and now you're in higher ed, which can be very different?
I'll repeat for the people back. The question was how they've experienced the shift from working in a K-12 system to higher ed.
Well, I wasn't a president, so I don't know that experience of a higher ed situation. But when I was hired by the previous dean to come, after I retired from NACO, to come and create a new master's program for school leaders. I jokingly said, is syllabi with two eyes or one eye? I had written the syllabus before. Lesson plan, yes. What I do know, though, that our experiences get to see a big picture. So when you come to work as a faculty member here, for me, was always wanting to see the big picture. Because you can, as a faculty member, just get very, narrow into your content, into your class, and do that, not seeing the connections to other things, to other courses, to other programs. So I think we bring that view, that lens, just because that's what we did. We always had to see the big picture. And so doing that at the higher ed is also something that I think, I'll speak for my colleagues, but I think that's something we do just automatically. And so that helps us because we're more curious. We want to ask, what are you doing? What are you doing? How are you, we're more curious about that because we're used to seeing it. We're not always used to be the boss, but we're more curious about what the big picture looks like and how it impacts all of us. That was it for me.
Maybe that's understood.
Yeah, I mean, I would only say the systems don't talk to each other. These systems exist in silos. These two systems exist in silos. And my experience in K-12 essentially gave me a lot of data about what it is that is part of the experience of learning in that system that applies to where many of these students would hope to go. So I would ask myself, what is it that we are or are not providing in the way of experiences, learning experiences, social experiences, et cetera. But what are those experiences that are not part of the portfolio of one of my students in K-12 that we should have such that this student would be successful going into a 2 or 4 year institution? And what I found was even when I got to the 4-year institution, they were not necessarily interested in looking back at the K-12 system, other than in more accusatory tones. They were not interested in looking back at the system and saying, okay, now how do we talk to each other? They were very interested in looking at those two systems and saying, that's not my job. That's just not my job. K-12 is my job. Higher ed is my job. And if the two don't meet, that's because the students fell in a gap. It's their fault. And it should be the K-12 dollar that literally picks them up and gets them ready to come to us. It was a sad reality to think about how the two systems, could have been much more articulate with one another, but just simply were not.
Eric, and I'll get you next after that.
So one of our online questions here is from Pamela Kelly. How do you manage your teaching career when the teachers on your team are completely burned out and have a disdain for their roles as educators? How do you remain the light that students have great admiration for?
Look for critical mass. Find critical mass. It's not everybody for whom the light has gone out. There are some people, and I always think about this in terms of, sort of a third, a third, a third. There's a third of your people, maybe not even quite that much. There's 10% of your people who essentially are, when you say we are going to be doing some extraordinarily new work or going to be doing something very bold or engineering a new system and so forth, there's a good 10% of your people. This is actually true. These numbers hold true in business as well as in private sector as well as public sector. There's about 10% of people who look at you and either they say it or they don't say it, but essentially the answer is no. The answer is no, not possible, and they give any number of reasons as to why. There's about easily 70% of the people who look at that question that you're posing, or look at that direction or the horizon and vision that you're providing, and they say, you know what, maybe if, and then they have conditions under which it might happen. If we had more money, if we had more time, if. And then there's another, whatever's left, 10, 12%, 15% of people who are essentially saying, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you were here. I am so glad to hear you say that, because I've been wanting to do that for the last 10 years of my career, right? You need to look for that maybe column. Your leadership is a function of moving maybes to yes, as opposed to no's out the door. Because you will chase 10% of your problem with 30% of your time. So you do not want to go do that. That's a lose, lose, lose proposition. Right? You can chase those people till the cows come home, and literally the cows will come home before they're gone. So do not spend any time. You know, I'm trying to look and see who am I talking to, but it's somebody on the.
Yeah, it's that somebody
Yeah, I'm
online.
looking at the show, like, I don't know. But you know, you should really be thinking about, when you have that kind of a circumstance, there's critical mass of somebody in that school that is really interested in trying to do something extraordinary or exciting, or just take the next step. That's who you want to amass. You want to try to spend time and build a relationship and coach people who are in that position. Chasing the people who are in that no category is at least initially, is a lose proposition.
Right here, but
Thank you. Can you share an instance where implicit bias may have influenced your interactions with team members and how you address that situation?
That my implicit bias, that I was aware of my own bias.
I think it could go either way. I mean, if it was something that happened to you, or if you had done it to another teammate.
Well, I'll just tell you, as the first woman of color in every organization I led, there was implicit bias out there. You can't be the superintendent. My favorite phone call was when I got a call, my secretary said, there's a gentleman who wants to speak to the superintendent. I said, hello. The parent said, I want to speak to the superintendent. I am the superintendent. You're a woman. I am a woman. Then I want to speak to the board president. Oh, you're in bad luck. She's a woman too. It was, I mean, that was, you know, and then in Salt Lake, the only brown person of 40 superintendents, and from California. So that bias was there. But you're there for a reason. What concerned me most in my district was, if I was treated a certain way, I quickly asked, how are you treating others that look like me? That's what I'm more concerned about. I've got to step back. My concern is, how are you treating the parents and the children? Let's have that conversation. Because I have position, I can do this. That's where I use my bias or my instinct, to where I could be that buffer to say, what's going on? If I'm treated like that. That was my concern. That's when I would just work with that. But having been that, you know, first Latina, first, you know, it's still something that, you know, in our own country, don't want women leaders. And so that was something I faced from first principal, first this, first, and so yeah, so it's like, and I'm tired of being the first. I don't want to be the first. I think that's something we have to really focus on for young women and young girls. I'll never forget when I was walking in elementary school and my director asked this little girl, so what do you want to do when you grow up? President of the United States. Oh, you want to be the first one? She goes, I hope not. My girl. That's what I want for those girls, because that, you know, and he just looked at me and said, oh, that's your answer. But that's the passion that I want to inspire in all our children, that they can be what they want to be. And as my colleague said, we have to set the conditions for that, so they can at least strive for that. And we may not all get it, but we want them to have the skills to make those decisions later on.
Right here.
Yes, first and foremost, thank you, wonderful, incredible, stories, and thank you for sharing your vulnerability and the different battle scars that you all have, faced and raised throughout the years. So my question is, thinking of the many battles you have faced throughout the decades as high-level leaders, how have you continued to elevate yourself and your teams while making the work sustainable, since y'all are like, you've been through so many different stages and so many different seasons? How have you remained like at such a high level for so many years? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
We all have a lot of gray hair.
Yeah.
I don't know how sustainable that is.
You know, when honestly, you don't think about it when you're in it, because your North Star is your North Star. I look at this job as I serve others. Especially with my underprivileged, I have a responsibility to take care of our kids. As Dr. Robles said, there's something that I'm held to that's a higher purpose that's beyond me. This is a calling. It's not a job. It really is. And so faith is, I think it's spirit work. I'll call it that. And just knowing that there is a moral purpose that's much bigger behind this, that makes me insignificant. I'm just following the steps. I will tell you, meditation does work. 30 minutes a day, I started to wear the job like a loose garment. Just things that I was holding on to personally that I didn't have to, getting into the 4 agreements and really living that out. And then just when you believe so strongly in this, a lot of that stuff on the outside, they're just situations. They're not problems, they're situations. And in the position you're in and called to do, you handle it. And it's just goes back to process. So you don't even think about it. You look back and you go, okay, well, wow, that happened. Hey, I was doing what was right by children and bringing people along with me, and especially with those diverse communities. Right action doesn't produce winners and losers. So where do you get people to come together for she said it best. If not us, then who? I used to say that to the superintendents. Well, the job's impossible. It's not. It's a great job. But you're working on behalf of other people and not yourself. It's part of the process. And so many proud moments that you get from this work when you see kids change and you see the fruits of your labor. That's all that matters, is our children. They're the next round. And when you're charged to do this, it doesn't matter. You're paid to handle it. So handle it.
Thank you. Eric, there was another online question,
Yeah, there's several here.
and then let's take one, and then we got one back there.
So our next one is, how can you influence and change the culture of a school district where the board members and superintendent, they operate in a more transactional manner? Yeah, that's the question.
What was the question?
Can
How
you
do you-
change the culture of this district where they're operating in a transactional manner?
I mean, I just go to Sean Ginwright's frame, one of the pivots, transactional and transformational. One is all technical and the other is, I mean, we're in the business of people for people. It's the humanity of it. So I need to understand more about the question, but for me, the heart and soul of what we do isn't part of the technical aspect of the job. I can teach the technical to anybody. Where's your spirit in this work? Where's your conviction that every kid can and will? Not start September and hope they get it. That just doesn't fit. So when it comes to a board and superintendent and the organization functioning around a moral conviction, no matter what, and you build those systems and conditions around, this is what it looks like, this is what we're charged to do. I think the moral conviction around what we do is not a transactional duty. It's much different than that, so.
I take that question as they're not working together.
Oh, is that
how-
what it was?
That's how I hear the
I
question.
misunderstood. I
That's how
apologize.
I hear the question is,
Yeah, I've asked if they could clarify, but yeah, I think.
that's how I'm hearing it, but I could be wrong. Because if that's the case, the reality is that they're the board. And if they're not willing to engage with you and you have an ego that you're gonna fight with them, you're gonna lose. Just leave. Just leave. It's not worth it. Because that board has to change. And that's not your job, that's the community's job. And so you can do everything you can. But there are boards that should not be boards. That should not be on there. They're there for the wrong reasons. And you have to decide if that's what you want to play. That's the game you want to play. I chose not to do that in Montebello.
The other way of looking at that question is every board is gonna have some understanding of the transactions that have to take place under their auspices. And they gravitate towards that because it's actually easy to see, it's easy to observe, it's easy to do. Whether you agree with it all the time is another question. But what I found useful was I gave somebody else that work. And I did what I do. So I had deputies or assistants in my career who were really good mechanics. They were really good mechanics. And when the car came in that needed that kind of person, that was your job. That was your job. You speak with that board member. You work that problem with that board member. And get back to me and let me know when and how I can play in being able to solve this problem. But I just think that there are an awful lot of people who really understand only the base of this work. What you've heard up here with these folks, these are people who are sophisticated, thoughtful, powerful, mindseted, faithful people to a cause. You've heard revolutionaries here. You're not hearing people who are just street bums, right? You're here, well, maybe, hell, I don't. But you're hearing people who are pretty seasoned in their heart about this work. This work moves because of your heart, not because of your head. So you have to pay attention to what's happening inside of a person. What's happening inside of you? What's happening inside of your evolution as a leader? How are you growing in here? You know, if you're not a person of faith, regardless of what it may be, but if you're not a person of faith, you're gonna have a hard time because some of the things that you encounter don't have a category. They don't have a book. They don't have a YouTube video, right? They just need you to be a person who travels it based upon your faith in the steps to which you now have to be ordered. But if you have no faith, if you're not there, if that's not something that's important to you, it's okay. I'm not denigrating anybody, but I'm simply saying you will be missing out on one of the categories that you need a container to put some of this stuff that happens to you in, because some of it, we can't even tell you all of it here. You don't have enough time, and there's not enough time in your degree program for us to tell it all to you. So, you know, get used to the fact that there's some things that are gonna travel by pedagogy, some things you're gonna know because it's technically right and technically easy to see, like these board transactions and so forth, but some of it, boy, you're just gonna have to rely upon good common sense and faith to basically understand where to take the next move.
And I think we've heard a number of times, you gotta be willing and know when it's time to leave. You got time for two more, these last two, this one and this one.
Once again, appreciate your time being here, sharing your insights. My name is Montoya. My question is, you can share about your mentors, the kind of mentorship that contributed to your thought process, to your values, and navigating the organizations that you led, and the type of decisions that you had to make. If you could allude to some of the mentorship that you received along the way to make you who you are and your character?
I had wonderful mentors, from the time that I was a youth teacher and a principal, and as a good friend of mine that I met when I was a young teacher, who was the only other Latina principal in the school district of Montebello, who took me under her wing and encouraged me to move. Even my superintendent in Montebello was a mentor to me as well. And then as I moved into my career, other colleagues were my mentors, that I could call and just vent or check what I was thinking. Because I always went into it, I don't know everything. It's a new experience. I haven't gone through this. What do you think? I'm thinking about this. Have you thought about this? So you always, I mean, for me, that was very critical through my entire career about asking for assistance and help. I never was ashamed about that. I knew that they could help me see a perspective, because I could be, just focus on this, maybe not the 360 though. And that always helped me and that good step for me. And I continue to this day, going to people and ask for their help. And I think the question was, how do you stay on top of everything and be aware of things going on? I've always been curious. What else could I learn? Who else could I learn from? Because if I start thinking I know it all, I'm in deep trouble. And that's what gets a lot of leaders in trouble, because they think they know it all, and that's like the kiss of death. I go in with, I don't know, help me. I can tell my cabinet, if you're waiting for me to have the idea, we're in deep trouble. Let's figure it out. I've got an idea. No, help me. Let's find a better idea together. Because they would look at me and I'm thinking, why are you looking at me? Let's figure this out together. And there are going to be things that come up. That he said, tactical things that yes, I can do blindfolded, but there are going to be situations. I remember when I had to go in Salt Lake City, when I had never had to deal with religion in the curriculum. And one of the teachers was proselytizing. And a Jewish family filed a lawsuit, went all the way to the 10th Circuit, was going to go to the Supreme Court. First time ever that I had to deal with that, because it was curriculum and again, so who do I call? Who do I talk to about that, right? Call somebody that I know. Who do I go to? Because I wanted to make sure I had the information, correct information, to do what I thought in my gut and doing the right thing, and making sure that the board had the right information as well. So I think it's always being curious and trying to find out more about your profession and your strategies.
Thank you. We got one more, the last one.
Hi, Cassie Lundian, thank you all again so much. I'm wondering, obviously you all have climbed so far up the ladder in this world of education. And I'm curious, how did you guys know what was the right next step to take along your career? And do you think the best leaders have sort of been at every step, like teacher to principal to superintendent? Or does that path not necessarily need to be so linear in order for you to be a great leader?
That's a great question. Are you a superintendent?
Teacher.
Good for you. No, it's a great question. The way that some of this is serendipity, to be honest, for me. It chooses you. I'm from New York, but I didn't intend to go back to New York as superintendent. I was happy being superintendent in Sacramento and Tacoma, Washington, and that was a wonderful life for me. But it called me. And when you are called, to the point that was raised before, when you're called, you know in your heart if it's a good, if it feels right. There are an awful lot of opportunities that may come your way that you have to be mature in being able to look at to say, does this match up? Is this a good match for me? Do I really see myself being able to be successful there, helping children there, working in a community, living in a community? Does that all match up for me? It requires me, we all do these really important parts of our classes in leadership around reflection. This is where this pays off. Because if you reflect on yourself and understand yourself well enough to know what you are, who you are, where your, as they call it, your North Star is, what is it that matters to you? If you know those things, it actually is easy to pick out and separate things that make sense versus things that make no sense, right? There have been plenty of jobs that have been offered to all of us at one point in time, and you'd look at it and you would think, wrong time, not the right time for me to leave. That's an EQ issue, right? You have to know that about yourself. Now is not the time for me to leave, or this is a great time for me to leave, right? I've been here enough times, enough years now that I've gotten my work done, and it's time for me to move on. It's just as important to really understand that, and you'll know in your gut when it is. Now, you also have the reality that as a board, they can determine for you at any given point in time, it is your time to leave. Right? It is not up to you, and your gut is not gonna have anything to do with it. This is gonna be, we are going to now dismiss you, we're gonna remove you, we're gonna, buy up your contract or whatever the case may be. As I said, if you take a job as superintendent, mentally, you should say to yourself, wow, this is an exciting day because I'm getting ready to be a superintendent. And then right behind that, you ought to say, oh, I could leave this job in the next 6 weeks or next 6 months if I had to, because there's nothing that is promised to you once you take that job. Nothing. It's all up in the air. I don't care how nice the contract is written. I don't care how nice they are to you. I don't care how many parties they give you, welcoming you to the district and all of that. That stops at about 36 hours. And when it's all over, the first time you do something that is going to cause you to actually have a breakup, if you will, with a board member, a disagreement with a board member, or multiple board members. The first time that happens, all that stuff just goes out the window. It just does. There's no guarantees here. And that's why teachers and principals look at superintendents when they walk in the door and they say, oh yeah, you're transformational. Yeah, that's great. I was here when you got here, and I'll be here when you're behind is gone. Right? And it is because they don't really believe that you're going to basically run the race that it's going to take to change the trajectory of lives that you said you wanted to do when you interviewed for this job. Black, brown, poor, white, doesn't make any difference. They look at that and they think, you know what, this is a hill that is way too high to climb, and he or she will not climb it because they only want the transaction. They got the contract, they got a car, they got this, they got that, they're dancing in the streets, everybody's all happy, and that's how they want to keep it. And they look to determine whether or not you're one of those people. Wow. You just, taking the funk here and just trying to get in because you got a new jacket, which by the way, I do. Or are you serious? Are you serious about changing the lives of all the people, the kids that we talked about? And they'll know that by the moves the dance moves you make on the boardroom floor. They'll know it there. They'll know it there. So you'll know too whether or not, don't think this is all about the board. You'll know too whether or not you want to stay with a board for 5 years. I've not had a job. I shouldn't say it like this, but I saw it read out my mouth now. I have not held the superintendency more than 5 years. The college presidency I got for 8 years. But every superintendency that I've had, I was one of these 5-year people. I'd go like gangbusters for that first 5 years. And in those 5 years, I broke enough eggs that they said, get out of the kitchen. Right? We don't want you to be in here because of you won't do this or you won't do that, or you don't abide by this or you don't abide by that. And they were right. They were 100% right. In most of the cases, I was not going to abide by what they did. They would never allow my internal system would not allow me. So, I knew after 5 years that was going to be it. And then hopefully you have succession management in your mind and you turn it over to somebody who's got the next 5 or the next 10. But don't get the job. Don't worry about, and then do the job. Then don't worry about keeping the job, because the job is gonna come to you. Once you've actually been in it long enough, it's gonna come, there'll be other jobs and other opportunities that come to you in a heartbeat.
Wow.
Paul, Darlene, last words?
I mentioned my mentor. You know her, Dr. Mary Gonzalez Mentor.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
In fact, that's where I met you with her in Sacramento. The best advice she gave, get your ego on the way. Once your ego is out of the way, you'll be able to do a good job. It's about doing the job for the right reasons, not for the accolades, not for the important, you know, like I'm gonna get recognized or I'm gonna do this. It's about doing it for the right reasons for the children that you serve. As all of us said here, you're serving a community. And when my ego is involved, how I know it's my ego, when I start to think about it for more than 24 hours. When that happens, that's when I say, okay, what's it about? Get it over, darling, let it go, because that's my internal temperature. Okay, why am I still 12 hours, 13 hours? So the next day, then I sit down with myself and say, let it go. It's not about you, darling. I was hurt. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm hurt. Okay, I blew it. Okay. Then I let it go. That was my best advice that I've taken with me to this day. And I just used to say, I'm sorry, I double booked myself. I was supposed to be somewhere at 6:30 downtown to do a closing, and so I need to leave, but thank you. Pedro.
Thanks, Darlene.
Thank you. Double booking, but I guess I. Good luck, Paul.
See you tomorrow. Paul, final words?
Well, first of all, I haven't been in these classrooms since I was a student, so I just got flashbacks. So I want to just wish you all the best in your own journey. I, honest to God, the thing that I want to reiterate that my colleagues said is, you know, our kids have never needed us more, especially now. And the responsibility attached to public education when we see the disparities in wealth in the country with the embarrassment of riches. There's such a sense of urgency around this, and that's why I'm still staying in the game, even though I've retired. But you know, you put kids first, good things happen. You do the right thing, good things happen. Just keep that at the forefront, because you're the next round of leaders that are going to take this on. I know some faces in here will be sitting in that superintendency, and just whatever you need, you're part of the USC family. We're going to support you. You have a family surrounding you. We will make ourselves accessible during your journey, and just much love to all of you. Thank you for what you do every day for our children. Just thank you.
Let's give our parents a big hand. The good news is they're on our faculties. You can come see them, you can write to them, and we have others. We got Dave Cash, where's Greg Franklin? We've got a whole bunch of experienced leaders on this faculty, so I hope you'll reach out and seek them out. So thank you for tonight. Dave, turn it back to you.
I'll just say, this is what you get at USC. Right? I mean, look at that leadership. Unbelievable. And I'm gonna ask you all to also look at each other. It's a very different, I tell all my students this, a very different room than it was when I got my doctorate a while ago. And we can thank great leaders like Karen Sims Gallagher and Pedro Noguera for making you the educational leaders that our panel talked about in the future. So thank you all. I want to thank my students for being here. Yeah. And thank you, Dean Noguera, for your inspired leadership. Appreciate you each and every day.